This is the sound of your ride home with Dad after he caught you vaping. Awkward, isn't it? Most vapes contain seriously addictive levels of nicotine and disappointment. Know the real cost of vapes. Brought to you by the FDA.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, you know, to check you have the tickets in your wallet first before you drive 2 hours to the big game. Seriously, you had one job. Now the closest you'll get to the 50-yard line is parking lot D. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
We spend a lot of time training our guys' defensive intelligence. And so I talk to the tackles. The way that we talk about it in our room is the center sings lead, everybody else sings soprano, but the two main backup singers are the tackles.
In this episode of the season, presented by Vertical Raise, Travis James, offensive coordinator at John Carroll University, joins us to discuss efficient practice strategies. We explore methods for streamlining practices as the season progresses, focusing on maintaining high efficiency and reducing physical contact for players. Coach James emphasizes the importance of establishing routines and adapting to the challenges that arise when players are injured or practice rosters thin out. He talks about some practice techniques, such as using label can to simulate defensive positions, which helps their offensive line practice with precision and effective communication. We also talk about wristbands as an effective tool to quickly and efficiently simulate various defensive looks during practice with the scout team. Stay tuned for Winning Edge takeaways following the episode. And be sure to check out our sponsor, Vertical Raise. Elevate your fundraising to new heights with Vertical Raise's digital platform. Get more out of your fundraising by contacting your fundraising coach. The link is in the show notes.
This episode is brought to you by Opill, the first over-the-counter daily birth control pill available in the U.S. Opill is FDA approved, full prescription strength and estrogen-free. Plus, there's no prescription needed. Finally, the days of needing a prescription for birth control are over. Opill is available online and at most major retailers. Take control of your health and reproductive journey with Opill. Birth control in your control. Use code BIRTHCONTROL for 25% off your first month of Opill at Opill.com.
As we start settling into the season, we always want to think about how we can streamline our practices, be the most efficient, look to build our routines that we're going to carry through the rest of the season, and account for things like guys being down and how we might be able to get some more reps with taking some of the contact off of them, etc. And talking about all those ideas today with us is the offensive coordinator at John Carroll University, Travis James. Travis, great to have you here.
Thanks, Keith. I'm excited for the opportunity to be able to hopefully give something back for something to help people win.
Yeah, definitely. Travis, it's been great to get to know you here over the last really year here since the offseason started and had you on our D3 Top 25 clinic, was able to go out to John Carroll and visit with you guys, and definitely love having you here on the podcast finally. So we're getting into this idea today of settling into our practice routine. You get those first few weeks of the season under your belt, and there's always a lot of new things that come into play there, and we got to look at how we continue to develop our people. And as we start to hit some of those mid-season weeks, there will be guys who are banged up, and our practice roster maybe is a little bit thinner than it was in the early weeks, but looking at some of those ideas there and how we do this. When you think about building that routine, I mean, what kind of things come to mind as far as things you want to do to make sure that we're getting done what we need to and we're being efficient with it throughout the season?
Yeah, that's certainly a challenge for us every year. And obviously we all are tasked with different numbers, whether it's guys being down, you may be in a position group that's a little bit thinner as you're trying to rep things through. I think that's one challenge. And then the other side of it, Keith, is the best offensive lines are the ones who execute the most consistently, right? And so there's a violence element to it, but there's also a poise element to it. And it's my job and it's our goal every week to make sure that we can rep the movement and the multiplicity that we really are seeing defensively. And we got to do that in the most efficient way that's possible. So for us, there's kind of a few things that we hit on. And so from a teaching environment perspective, one of the cheapest and the most effective tools that we teach with are cans. I've watched defensive guys use those for years to rep blitz tracks and all sorts of things. And for us, I've been in situations where I've not had enough guys be a good look team on defense, but then it's kind of blossomed into its own thing where it really helps us teach effectively. But even before I get into operation, it really is important to say, like, when those trash cans are out there, it's my expectation in those drill periods that we are playing with elite technique, and we got to communicate with great detail and great volume. I mean, it should sound like a thunder is coming when our feet are pounding and we're making line calls before the snap. So that's the expectation. When we are in these periods, it is not just a walk around period. So the organization of them goes as such. They're not just random trash cans either. For us, we label them. So the defensive linemen have letters that are taped to them, and they be the ones that you're used to seeing in a front diagram, the N, the T, the E, whatever you call the boundary outside backer. The linebackers all have numbers, and they have those detailed 11, 14, 7. Those guys are pretty consistent. And then the secondary, those guys are in a different color. They're red trash cans for us. I want to make sure that we can rep things with landmarks, and when we're communicating people that they clearly understand where we're going to, and I can validate them. But then when we go through teaching with the cans, so this can have application even before the season. You may be in preseason camp or spring ball or whatever you have time to teach. There's really kind of 3 ways that we go through it. Number 1 is group teach, which is it's an elevated jog through. I'm teaching from the front. In other words, I'm on the same side that the cans are on, and we are running that whatever run play or protection that we have called as a group. So one offensive line is up. I've given the play call. There's a front and a coverage shell that's lined up across from us, and everybody's executing their assignment with great technique and communication like I hit on earlier. It's one group at a time, but it's rapid fire. As soon as one line is done, one line in tight ends, the next unit goes. The next kind of mode that we get into, and this is definitely for the in-season world, is full unit. So everybody who's going to be involved in the 2 or 3 deep of the play is going to run the same play at the same time. And I separate each group by about 3 yards in between. So if we're going to run power to the right versus a full down front, we're going to hear everybody make their line calls, everybody identify the front, and everybody run the play simultaneously based on the can look that's in front of them. Obviously, there's an advantage to that because you're getting as many people repping as you can. And then the last way that we rep here is we 2-huddle these cans. So I do this late in the week on a Thursday and Friday, which is where we're really starting to cement the game plan, is if we're playing a defensive unit that are going to stem consistently, or they're going to be true multi-front team. Sometimes it can be difficult to replicate those things with a defensive unit as a scout team. So I'll line up 2 different defensive units with 2 different front structures. Sometimes it can be 2 different coverage structures. And I will call a formation in a play with the offensive line, the running back group, and they will run one play versus one front in one direction, and immediately go to the other side and run it versus the other look. And then we'll talk about things as they go. So that's just kind of 3 modes that we're in that world. And then some of the advantages, it multiplies our ability to teach. If I was at a place where I was only one O-line coach, I would use this quite a bit. I use it now with multiple people around, and we can coach with depth. And then the other piece is I will talk through defensive adjustments, and I'll say, this can is going to blitz, or I'll take the place of that can, or I'll give a defensive reaction. For example, hey, let's log this guy so we can feel what this looks like on the run, and it allows us to hit some situational pieces. So that's a big part of it for us for sure.
With the cans, you mentioned having the defensive back cans in different colors. Now, I know you said you do some full unit stuff. Do you put the defensive back cans out there when you're working with just the defense or offensive line?
I do. And part of that is, Keith, kind of answering your question in two ways. We spend a lot of time training our guys' defensive intelligence. And so I talk to the tackles. The way that we talk about it in our room is the center sings lead, everybody else sings soprano, but the two main backup singers are the tackles. And so they've got to be able to communicate the contour of the defense to their side of the formation with regards to the near safety, the near corner, and whatever overhang player may or may not be there. So as we're repping things, especially on these days when we're in a jog through segment, I will do that with the offensive line pretty consistently from day one. If it's a time where we have the full team on the field, we only have one team here at John Carroll, that I'm usually talking through the secondary components that may affect us, and they're not lined up out there. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. It's a little bit advanced. I do think high school teams can do it. It's something you can start layering into your teaching and getting them to understand what may happen, where blitzes may come from based on what's happening with the alignment of the secondary. I know Joe Thomas talked about that on this podcast. A huge thing in the NFL, obviously. I think the other thing you brought up is very important. The walk-through, jog-through, you said, I want to hear those feet thundering. I know our offensive line coach, when I was at BW, really introduced this. I believe he got it from Paul Alexander. Our line coach was Mark Giacomo, John Carroll alum himself. But Mark would make sure that, when they were going through, even if they were just walking through on air, that he wanted those feet to pound exactly like they were coming off the ball. In some ways, even overemphasize. That's what Paul would talk about and relate it to playing the piano. If you heard Paul Alexander speak before, that's a big part of his teaching. And I know Mark picked up on that, but it is very important. It gives you so much more out of that walkthrough rather than if guys just kind of stood there or kind of half-ass got into a stance and come off the ball, that you still want as much as possible, even though it's cans, you want it to feel, like you said, have that technique, have extreme focus on what you're doing.
No question. And I'll take that a spot further, Keith. I put a lot on our centers in our offensive system. And even when we're on the air, the expectation is that they're varying the front calls, that they have communication that's key. And we have a saying in the room, like, not even in a walkthrough should we be in any type of position where we're not in what we would classify as a dominant position. So one of my prouder moments as a coach is you'll watch our guys on the air, because we had a few segments that are designed on the air in the practice week. Like, they will work through a double team. You will clearly see guys transition and finish and chase their hands, and guys play the linebackers. They play to that expectation really well, whether there's a can or air. It's certainly something we emphasize here as well.
Taking a look then at some of the efficiency of this, I know that wristbands come into play for you guys. That's something that you use to help, as you said before, the efficiency of what's going on in practice. Tell us a little bit about what you do with those.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks for bringing that up, Keith. We've been using this band system for, I think this will be 10 or 11 years now. And it really stemmed out of how could we be more efficient when we were running a lot of play. And when I was at Illinois College in 2015 and 2016, in 2015, we ran 89 plays a game. And then in 2016, we were running 86 plays a game. So we were flying. And from a scout team perspective, we did not want to stop to show a card. And so we started to put everything on a wristband. This is before Go Route and those things really existed. But kind of what it's grown to over time is this has allowed us to rep versus as much variety and movement in what I would classify as the most efficient way as we can. So this is kind of how they work for us, Keith. So we need 7 guys within the base wristband system, and that's all we operate with now. We used to run these with all 11 guys on defense. It just hasn't been as natural for these periods for us. This makes it a little bit easier to transition in and out. So we have 7 wristbands that we build. And for the ease of transitioning from a 3-down front to a 4-down front, we base the entire wristband system out of a 3-4 structure. And then from that 3-4 structure, everybody is a boundary player or they are a field player with the exception of the nose guard. And so for example, when we do want to get to a 4-down front, we just bump the boundary outside linebacker to become the DN when his job is described on the wristband. And what that also allows us to do is we can, once again, transition fronts, but maybe more specifically is I can create whatever desired looks that we need, really, in speaking plain language. So each wristband has a few key areas. So each row, the horizontal angle, is numbered. So play number 1 is obviously going to be this. It's going to be to get everybody aligned correctly on the same job. And then there's 2 columns. One is alignment and one is assignment. In the alignment column, once again, I write that out in plain language. So if I'm trying to describe a 4 technique and I'm talking to the field end, I'll write in that box, head up on field tackle. And I'll talk about how we get everybody lined up here in a moment. And then their assignment is also very simple. I'll say fit field C gap, for example, or loop boundary B gap. And as we start to build these basic patterns, we can end up having a place where all of our wristbands hold 12 plays each section, and then each wristband has the spot for 3 inserts. So we can create 36 different looks on these wristbands. Now, what I do, Keith, is I do get going with this fairly early. And I do a study every year of 2 things. We know that I'm going to build a base look of 4-down looks and a base wristband of odd looks that I'm going to intermix throughout the wristbands. And not only will they allow us to have static looks, but then I'll also build twist games into each side. And then I'll build the common pressures out of odd and 4-down. And for me, those are 7 pressures per front. So as we get into a blitz pickup period, or we have any dead time in practice, we are runs and protections versus blitz. And the only thing that has to be communicated is at the beginning of the period, we got to communicate which direction is going to be the field and which direction is going to be the boundary to get everybody lined up. And then it's as simple as lining up and running the numbers. And so I'll say, hey, give me wristband number 1. And if wristband number 1 is an odd front with both outside linebackers blitzing, that's exactly what we're going to see. So it allows us to be very effective in our communication and cover ground quickly with moving bodies instead of just the cans.
A lot to chew on there. Definitely a way to be efficient with those things. Just from the coaching side and putting those together, typically, how long does it take you to get those wristbands together, printed out, ready to roll for a practice week?
That's a great question. So when we build these wristbands out, they're built with the base looks in mind. And so I would say that it takes a little bit of focus in the early portion of building. I'm happy to share any template with anybody to help the efficiency of your flow. But once you spend the hour or hour and a half on getting them lined up, they're printed and they're laminated and they stay in the wristband. And that's what we are repping. It's common pressures, like I mentioned. If we are going to see any more exotic pressures or anything that we really need to rep, we'll card those and spend some specific period time on those. But once they're done, they pay huge dividends. And then also, once the guys run through it with one flow, they start to understand the flow and they become creative, stemming different pressures and moving around in a good way that is creative.
Turns out, a delightfully clean home can make for a delightful start to the day. At Mrs. Meyer's, everything we make is inspired by the garden. With plant-derived and other thoughtfully chosen ingredients, our cleaning products smell like a dream and work like the Dickens, leaving your home sparkly clean and your to-do list tackled in no time. Goodness, there's no better feeling than that. Mrs. Meyer's, rooted in goodness. Visit mrsmeyers.com today.
When it comes to towing, seeing is believing. That's why Chevy Truck's advanced camera technology offers up to 8 available cameras for 14 unique views, so you can focus on the view that really matters. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Learn more about Chevy Trucks at Chevy.com. Safety or driver assistance features are no substitute for the driver's responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner. Read the Vehicle Owner's Manual for important feature limitations and information.
There's definitely a way that is budget friendly. I'm sure everybody would love to have go route, but you have to be able to afford those things. So this is an easy way to get some of that and to be efficient. I think that's the biggest challenge. I know when we went to being an up-tempo team, how do we practice in that manner? And this is something that allows you to do that, to get the different looks you want so that you're not always against a vanilla defense, that you get some of those things in there, especially the ones, as you said, the common pressures, the common stunts, the things that you're going to see again and again from a defense.
Correct. And I'll take that a spot further. It also allows us, because we write things in plain language, that I tell the guys all the time, like, we've done this. Like, I can go grab the kickers and the snappers and they can run these. And we've done that before. And it allows us to not necessarily have any confusion on where you are and what you need to get done. It's explained to you very quickly, not very long language. And we've gotten a lot of mileage out of these, that's for sure.
You know, thinking too, using the card system, even if you get guys moving in and out pretty quickly with those, what I like about the bands better is that guy can look at that band and see exactly what it is, where his eyes need to go to look at that on the band, compared to those cards that sometimes are moving in and out pretty quickly. You might miss some of those things, and you don't want to waste a rep. You want to be efficient. You want the looks that you're going to see. And when a guy misses that and goes the wrong place, it does kind of mess it up for you.
No doubt. But maybe the last thing that I have on that, because I agree with you completely, is when I'm talking about common pressures, I'm talking about 2 linebacker pressures. So 5-man pressures, and some of the 4-man stuff, it can be 6-man pressures, because I'm trying to move people and get the coaching of both sides of the run or both sides of the protection. So then we can cover, once again, as much ground as we can. If there's ever a time where I just want a single backer run through, for example, then I'll hold one guy, because I also, as these are built, I just have my cheat sheet. You know, play number 1 is, like we mentioned, it's an odd front structure with double edge pressure. Then I know that. I have that written in our language plainly, so I can get from place to place, whether we get ahead or just have a little bit better idea which way we're transitioning.
So we've talked about some ways we can be efficient, both the cans with wristbands, but this is also about building routine. I would love to hear your thought process, Coach, on how you build this routine for the season.
There's a few things that I really believe in repping offensive linemen that I've learned from experience in changing personnel or building comfortability, that we rep certain ways. So the number one thing that I think is probably maybe more common at the high school level, but sometimes college guys can get caught in one way of thinking, is we rep every lineman out of both the right and the left-handed stance and individual. And that's consistent for us. When I was a GA, I was blessed to GA for Charlie Coe, and he used to always say there's the depth chart and then there's the real depth chart. And so we've all been in situations where your right tackle goes down and your next best right tackle may be to move the left tackle to the right and move your left tackle in, right? Or whatever the situation may be. So I believe in that, repping an individual, because I want to build real and really universal depth. And then the other tactic that we use quite a bit in our offense is, that we believe in strongly, is tackle over and extra offensive line personnel groupings. And so to be able to make guys comfortable blocking from each side is really important for us. And then, like I mentioned, an individual, I believe in that really strongly. And then as we get to team periods, one thing that I believe in as well, based on the age and experience of our guys, maybe not as much. There are a couple days in season where we will do this in a practice week, but definitely the preseason and spring ball thought is I will move guys left to right in the same period to make them as comfortable as possible, work with different guys, communicate differently. And we want to be as ahead of the curve of the contingencies as we possibly can. I would say the second thing that we do, and I believe in really consistently, is we're going to drill leverage in the run game and protection every day, and that we're in pads and we're repping in those style of practices that have dedicated time for individual. I don't necessarily believe in beating guys down, but I never, ever want to lose sight of what a dominant position feels like. And we have circuits that we roll throughout the course of the week. So where I'm eliminating, this is not a reach block. This is not a set on an inside shade. This is what it looks like to be in a dominant position as a pass protector and as a run game blocker. And we will cycle through those to make sure that we are as fresh as we can be. And then maybe the last thing that I think is maybe a little bit unstated by some people, but I would challenge to try to create this in terms of your routines, is we do have a true blocking progression. I think we're in a time where in football where there's a lot of things that are go, go, go and can be grab baggy, but we want to be relentless in the things that are foundational, and that's technique for us. And so our blocking progressions are going to be able to put our guys in a specific individual or combination technique against the primary static and movement scenarios that they're going to see. So when we build this routine, we also work to match it to the practice week. So our guys can set our watch to it. We can set our planning to make sure that we know on every Wednesday we're working blade drill progression, which I'll give you an example of here in a moment. And so we know that those things are being checked off the list, because I do believe in building momentum over time. We don't just rep to rep. I don't believe that. We want to build with quality reps and move on, because there's a lot of things that we've got to get done. Now, even though we're creating routine, if you spend any time with me or us at practice, you understand that the default is high intensity, really high intensity, high physicality, and immediate feedback. And so an example of what one of these circuits would be, or progressions, I should say, would be, is what we call blade drill progression, which is all of our vertical double teams. Now, we're going to rep the tackles and the tight ends together. And so from an organizational standpoint, which I was always fascinated with as a coach, we are going to rep in 3 pods. So it's going to be 3 groups of 2, and then there's going to be 2 guys across of us on defense. Everybody else is going to fill in behind, rotating. A couple things on that. I believe in having 2 groups of defenders out there as well. So as we finish blocking one and I'm moving to the other, we got fresh guys cycling through all the time. So that's a waterfall start. So I'm going to work left to right, and it'll go based on the cadence. All of our landmarks and all of our keys are the same. We're going to landmark the sternum. It's an over and up rhythm to our feet, and that's all good. But what do I know is going to get checked off in this period? We're going to work just a fit up, gap fit, high leg combo through a man and navigate and delivery exchange to a backer. Then we're going to work a gap near foot. So we're going to have a defender in a gap. We're going to near foot him and roll, navigate to the backer. Then we're going to get to a head up combination, right? Where we'll have a player head up over the inside player. We're going to knock him over. Then we're going to have a gap player moving in and across the face of the inside man, and an inside shade moving out. We're going to hit all this stuff coming out of one-sided stance one week, and we'll flip it the next. And we are going to move and get as much work in as we can with high intensity and immediate feedback in about an 8-minute period. So it allows us to build progression teaching, and then it also makes it so we have a group period that's designed to get the most out of it. So just some insights from practice.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing the ideas about the cans, the wristband. Definitely a lot to chew on here, but I think in season, it is always looking at how can we continue to refine, look at our routines, keep them fresh, but more than anything, I think the key words we've had here is they're effective and they're efficient.
Thank you, Keith. Yeah, we try to be as relentless as we can, chasing both of those things and not losing a physical edge in everything that we do. But details without violence, as we all know, is not a winning formula. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to share with you today.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you here, and best of luck to you and the Blue Streaks here in 2024.
Thanks, Keith.
Here's our winning edge takeaway from our conversation with Coach James. I think the important thing here is technique over volume. Don't run reps simply for the sake of running reps. Coach James talked about how he believes in quality reps that build technique and ensure proper execution. Quality over quantity at this point in the season. He stresses the importance of teaching proper fundamentals with intensity by using drills and routines that reinforce that technique and maintain the physical edge that you need in games. He offered a lot of things that you can do with cans and maximizing the communication, which is one of the most critical elements with your offensive line on game day. Be sure to check out our partners, Vertical Raise, for your fundraising needs, modern football technology for analytics and in-game decision-making, and signature championship rings. when you win the championship this year. Links and information to all of our partners can be found in the description and on coachandcoordinator.com in our 10% toolkit. Follow us on X at Coach K. Grabowski.